Victoria prepared a 5-course Christmas dinner. Her children didn't just ghost her. They threw a party at her lake house without inviting her. But they forgot that Victoria is a retired CFO. By the time they woke up hungover, the house was sold. The locks were changed, and their trust funds were empty. Hello, ladies. Mary here. We all know the drill. You spend 3 days shopping, 2 days prepping, and 12 hours cooking. You polish the silver until your knuckles ache. You iron the tablecloth until it looks like a sheet of ice. You do it because it's tradition. You do it because you love them. But what happens when the love you serve on a silver platter is met with an empty chair? Tonight's story is about Victoria. She didn't just get mad when her kids ghosted her on Christmas. She got even. And she did it with a cell phone and a ruthless real estate agent. My name is Victoria, and I am a 68-year-old retired CFO. I know how to balance a spreadsheet, and I certainly know when the numbers don't add up. It was December 24th. The clock on the mantel chimed 7 p.m. The dining room table was a masterpiece. It was set for 8. My finest Limoges china, the heavy silver cutlery my grandmother brought over from England, and a centerpiece of white roses and holly that had cost me $200 at the florist. In the oven, a prime rib roast was resting perfectly. The Yorkshire puddings were rising. The house smelled of rosemary, red wine, and expensive wax candles. I poured myself a glass of Merlot and checked my watch. My eldest son Preston was supposed to be here at 6 o'clock. My daughter Allison was supposed to bring the grandkids at 6:15. It was silent. The only sound was the crackle of the wood in the fireplace and the hum of the refrigerator. I picked up my phone. I had sent 3 texts. Dinner is ready at 6:30. Are you running late? Is everyone okay? No replies, just the cold silence of delivered. At 7:30 I started to worry. Not about them being rude, about them being in a ditch somewhere. The roads were icy. I was a mother. Catastrophic thinking was my default setting. I opened the Find My app on my iPhone. We shared locations for safety. I expected to see their dots on the highway stuck in traffic. I stared at the map. Preston's dot wasn't on the highway. Neither was Allison's. They were all clustered together. But they weren't coming toward my house. They were at the lake house. My lake house. The property I bought 10 years ago as a summer retreat. It was 2 hours north. It was fully stocked. And apparently it was currently hosting my family. I felt a cold flush hit my chest. They weren't missing. They were skipping. I tapped the app for my home security system. I had installed cameras at the lake house last year after a break-in scare. I had never told them. They thought the blinking lights were just motion sensors for the alarm. I opened the feed for the great room. The video loaded. There they were. My son Preston was wearing a Santa hat. He was pouring champagne, my vintage Dom Perignon, that I kept in the cellar for my 70th birthday, into a red Solo cup. My daughter Allison was laughing, sitting on the leather sofa with her feet up on the coffee table. The grandkids were tearing open gifts in the corner. They were having Christmas. Without me. In my own house. I turned up the volume on my phone. The audio crackled to life. Can't believe she bought it, Preston was saying, wiping champagne foam from his lip. I told her we had a flu bug going through the house. She's terrified of getting sick. She won't call for days. It's better this way, Allison sighed, tossing a piece of wrapping paper onto the floor. God, if I had to listen to her critique my parenting, one more time I was going to scream. Allison, the kids have too much screen time. Allison, sugar makes them hyper. Ugh. Give me a break. Enjoy the quiet while it lasts, Preston's wife Chloe chimed in. She was wearing my cashmere throw blanket as a shawl. Once we move her into the facility, the guilt trips are going to be endless. I froze. My hand gripping the phone turned white. The facility. Don't worry, babe, Preston said, clinking his cup against hers. I talked to the lawyer yesterday. The dementia diagnosis is tricky, but if we document her confusion, like how she forgot we weren't coming tonight, we can build a case for incompetence. By February she'll be in assisted living and we can sell the main house. And this place, Allison looked around the room. I want this place. It has great light. We'll split the assets, Preston said. Liquidate the portfolio, keep the lake house as a timeshare for the family. We just have to stick to the plan. Make her look confused. Gaslight the hell out of her. I sat there at my beautiful empty dining table. The prime rib was getting cold. The candles were burning down. They weren't just rude. They were plotting a coup. They were eating my food, drinking my wine, and planning to lock me away so they could cash out my life's work. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I am a CFO. When I see a massive liability on the balance sheet, I don't get emotional. I liquidate it. I took a sip of my wine. It tasted excellent. Then I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and turned off the oven. I covered the prime rib with foil. It would make excellent sandwiches for the week. I went into my study. I opened my safe. I pulled out the deed to the lake house. Then I called my real estate agent, Marcus. He was a shark. He worked on Christmas Eve because he loved money almost as much as I did. Marcus, I said when he answered. I have a listing for you, Victoria. He sounded surprised. Merry Christmas. You want to list something now? Right now, I said. The lake house, the lake house? But I thought your kids loved that place. They do, I said. That's why I want to sell it. Tonight. Victoria, it's Christmas Eve. I can't get it on the MLS until. Marcus, I interrupted. I don't want the MLS. I want a pocket listing. Call that developer you told me about last month, the one who wants to tear it down and build condos. Tell him if he can wire a deposit by midnight, I'll knock $50,000 off the price. You're serious? I want the sold sign on the lawn by morning, I said. And Marcus? Yes. Make sure the contract includes immediate possession. I want the eviction notice served with the coffee. Marcus called back in 12 minutes. I knew he would. Greed is the only thing faster than bad news. He wants it, Marcus said. His voice buzzing with adrenaline. The developer. He's been eyeing that lot for 3 years. He says if you sign the digital contract tonight, he'll wire the deposit to your escrow account immediately. But he has a condition. Name it, I said, taking another sip of wine. He wants immediate access for his survey crew. Like, tomorrow morning. Christmas Day. He wants to start demolition permits on the 26th. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes. That won't be a problem, Marcus, I said. In fact, tell him he can send his security team over at 8 a.m. to secure the site. I wouldn't want any trespassers. Slowing down his investment. Trespassers, Marcus asked. Victoria, is the house empty? It will be, I said. Send the papers. My phone pinged. DocuSign. Agreement of purchase and sale. For 40 Lakeside Drive. I opened the document on my iPad. I scrolled through the legalese. Purchase price. $1.1 million. Possession date. Immediate. Condition. As is. I pressed my thumb to the screen to sign. Victoria S. Sterling, it was done. The house where my children had learned to swim. The house where Preston had caught his first fish. The house they were currently defiling with cheap champagne and treason. It was gone. It was no longer a family heirloom. It was a demolition site. But I wasn't finished. I put down the iPad and picked up my phone again. I opened the smart home app, connected to the lake house. I watched the live feed for a moment. They were still drinking. Allison was mocking my famous Christmas pudding recipe. Preston was laughing about how easy it would be to get power of attorney. Let's see how you like the atmosphere, I whispered. I went to the thermostat settings, current temperature 72 degrees. Target temperature 50 degrees. I hit save. Then I went to the lighting controls, master bedroom floodlights. On guest rooms floodlights. On kitchen strobe effects security mode. On I didn't activate them yet. I set a timer. Schedule 3 a.m. Let them get nice and drunk. Let them fall into a deep alcohol-fueled sleep. And then, let them wake up freezing cold. under the harsh glare of security lights. They couldn't turn off because I had just changed the admin password. Finally, I opened my banking app. Preston wasn't just my son. He was my financial advisor at the boutique firm he worked for. It was a token title I gave him to boost his ego. He had view-only access to my main portfolio, which is how he knew how much it was worth, but he forgot that I was the one who taught him how to set up a trust. I logged into the main brokerage account, transfer funds, destination, the Sterling Charitable Trust, a dormant account I controlled at a different bank, amount, all available liquid assets. I authorized the transfer. It would take a few days to clear due to the holiday, but the pending notification would show up on his dashboard immediately. When Preston logged in tomorrow to check the loot he was planning to steal, he would see a balance of 0. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and scraped the beautiful uneaten Yorkshire puddings into the trash. It hurt, but cleaning the slate always does. I went upstairs to my bedroom. I put on my silk pajamas. I brushed my hair. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a notification from the security app. Thermostat adjusted to 50 degrees. I climbed into my warm bed under my heavy down comforter. I imagined Preston and Allison in 3 hours, shivering in their beds, hungover, blinded by the security lights, wondering why the house had suddenly turned against them. They wanted to inherit the house? They could have the cold that came with it. "Merry Christmas, kids," I whispered to the dark room. I closed my eyes, and for a woman who had just sold her memories and disinherited her bloodline, I slept remarkably well. Preston fumbled with his phone. His fingers were shaking, partly from the cold, but mostly from the sudden creeping realization that the ground had vanished beneath his feet. He opened the app. I knew exactly what he was seeing. He had view-only access to the Sterling Family Trust dashboard. For years he had watched that number sit there, growing, mentally calculating his cut. He stared at the screen. He swiped down to refresh. He swiped again. "Where is it?" he whispered. Then he looked up at me, his eyes wide and frantic. "Where is the money, Mom? The portfolio balance is 0. It says pending transfer to a charitable trust?" "That's right," I said, leaning my arm on the open window of my Range Rover. "The Sterling Charitable Trust. I set it up years ago for tax purposes. I never funded it. Until last night. You gave it away," Allison shrieked. "All of it? That's $5 million. "It's my money, Allison," I said. "I can burn it in the fireplace if I want to. And considering you were planning to use it to pay for my facility, I figured I'd remove the temptation." Preston stepped toward the car. He looked dangerous for a second, desperate men often do. But the lead security guard, a man the size of a vending machine, took one heavy step forward. Preston stopped. "You're sick," Preston spat. "You're mentally unstable. This proves it. Giving away your life savings? Selling a house overnight? We'll get a judge to overturn this. We'll prove you're incompetent." Yes," I said. "The incompetence angle. Gaslight the hell out of her. Isn't that the phrase you used?" Preston went pale. I never said that." I picked up my phone. I tapped the screen. The audio recording from the night before played through my car's Bluetooth speakers. It was loud. It was crystal clear. The dementia diagnosis is tricky, but if we document her confusion, we can build a case. Gaslight the hell out of her. The recording echoed off the trees. Allison covered her mouth. Chloe, Preston's wife, looked at her husband with pure venom. "You recorded us," Preston whispered. "I monitor my assets," I said coldly, "and unfortunately for you, this house was one of them. You weren't having a private family moment, Preston. You were plotting fraud in a property equipped with high-definition surveillance." I turned off the audio, so I continued, "If you try to take me to court, if you try to file for guardianship, I will play that recording for the judge. I will play it for your boss at the firm. I will play it for the ethics board. Do you think you'll keep your finance license after that?" Preston slumped. The fight went out of him. He knew he was beaten. He knew I had the documentation to ruin him professionally, not just financially. The foreman checked his watch. "Time's up," he barked. "Get your stuff. Anything left inside in 5 minutes goes into the dumpster." Mom Allison stepped forward. She was crying now, real tears? Fake tears? "It didn't matter, Mom, please. It's Christmas. We have nowhere to go. The kids." "You have a home, Allison," I said. "It's 2 hours south. I suggest you start driving. Maybe if you hurry, you can find a gas station open that sells Christmas dinner." But we drank. Preston mumbled. "We can't drive." "Then call an Uber," I said. "Or start walking. The cold air is good for hangovers." I rolled up my window. "Wait," Preston banged on the glass. "Mom, let's talk about this. We can fix this." I put the car in reverse. I watched them in the rearview mirror as I backed down the driveway. The security guards were ushering them toward their cars. They were dragging trash bags filled with their clothes and the unwrapped gifts for the grandkids. It looked like a very expensive refugee camp. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt like a CEO who had just fired an embezzling employee. I drove back to the main road. The sun was fully up now, glistening on the snow. It was a beautiful Christmas morning. But I wasn't going back to my empty house. I had one more stop to make. Preston and Allison thought the lake house and the investment account were the only things at stake. They forgot about the business, Sterling Logistics, the company my late husband built and I ran for 20 years. I still held the majority voting shares, but Preston sat on the board. He drew a salary. He used the company expense account for his client dinners. I pulled over at a rest stop. I opened my laptop. I drafted an email to the board of directors. Subject: emergency motion for removal. Attachment: audio underscore evidence 24 MP3. To the board. Please find attached evidence regarding board member Preston Sterling conspiring to commit financial fraud against the majority shareholder. I am calling an emergency vote for his immediate removal and a forensic audit of his expense accounts effective immediately. I hit send. Preston was going to have a very bad Monday. But as I closed the laptop, a notification popped up on my phone. It was from my home security system back in the city. Motion detected front porch. I opened the feed. It wasn't Preston or Allison. They were still scrambling at the lake. Standing at my front door was a man I hadn't seen in 2 years. It was Michael. My youngest son, the black sheep, the one who ran away to be an artist and refused to take a dime of the family money. He was holding a small wrapped box. He knocked gently. I stared at the screen. Michael wasn't part of the group chat. He wasn't at the lake house, and he was the only one who had come to see me on Christmas Day without being asked. "Answer it," I said. "Put it on speaker." In every family business, and make no mistake, a wealthy family is a business. There is always a wild card. The asset you wrote off. The investment that didn't yield immediate returns. Victoria had written Michael off years ago because he didn't fit the spreadsheet. He didn't want the MBA. He didn't want the country club membership. But sometimes when the market crashes, the assets you ignored turn out to be the only gold you have left. I drove back to the city with the heater on high. My phone was blowing up. Preston had called 14 times. Allison had sent a string of texts, ranging from begging to threatening legal action. I ignored them all. My focus was on the young man sitting on my front porch steps. I pulled into the driveway. Michael heard the engine and looked up. He looked rough. His coat was a little too thin for a Chicago winter. His boots were worn. He had a beard that Preston would have called unprofessional, and Allison would have called homeless chic. But he wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't pacing. He was just sitting there, shivering slightly, holding a small box, wrapped in brown butcher paper. "I got out of the car, Michael," I said. He stood up. He smiled. A crooked, hesitant smile. That reminded me painfully of his father. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Merry Christmas. I know I didn't call. I was in the neighborhood." Well, sort of. I took the train in. You took the train on Christmas Day, I asked. That takes 2 hours. Yeah, he shrugged. I figured you might be alone. I called Preston, but he didn't answer. I assumed they were doing their own thing. He didn't know. He had no idea about the lake house. He had no idea about the war I had just declared. I was out, I said, unlocking the front door. Come inside. It's freezing. We walked into the warm foyer. Michael wiped his boots carefully on the mat, looking around the house like he was entering a museum he wasn't allowed to touch. It looks nice, he said. The tree is huge. It's too big, I said. It's a lot of work for one person. I led him to the kitchen. I reheated the coffee, so I said, leaning against the marble island, "What brings you here, Michael? You haven't visited in 2 years. Do you need money?" It was a harsh question, but after the morning I'd had, I wasn't in the mood for subtlety. I needed to know if he was another vulture circling the carcass. Michael flinched. He looked down at his coffee. "No," he said quietly, "I don't need money. I sold a few paintings last month. I'm doing okay, I miss Dad. It's been 5 years today." I felt a pang in my chest. Preston and Allison hadn't mentioned their father once. They only mentioned his trust fund. "I missed him too," I said softer. "I brought you something," Michael said. He pushed the brown package across the counter. "It's not much, I made it." I opened the paper. It was a small canvas, an oil painting. It showed the lake house in summer, but not the way it looked now. It showed it the way it looked 20 years ago. There was a little boy fishing on the dock, Preston, a girl reading on the grass, Allison, and me and my husband sitting on the porch swing. It was beautiful, and it was heartbreaking because that version of the family was dead. "I wanted you to have it," Michael said, "before. I don't know, I just wanted you to have it." I looked at him. "Michael, I have something to tell you." "Yeah, I sold the lake house," I said, "this morning. It's going to be demolished." Michael blinked. He looked at the painting, then at me. "Oh," he said. He didn't scream, he didn't ask about the money. He just looked sad. That's too bad. It was a good house, but I get it. It's a lot to maintain. And the money," I continued, pressing him, "the family trust, I liquidated it. I gave it all to charity. There is no inheritance left. Zero. This was the test. The ultimate audit." Michael took a sip of his coffee. He looked me right in the eye. "Okay," he said. "Okay," I repeated. "That's all you have to say? You just lost millions of dollars." Michael shrugged. "Mom, I never wanted the money, that money. It made Preston and Allison crazy. It made them mean if it's gone, maybe they'll finally have to be normal people. Maybe it's a good thing." He paused, then looked at me with genuine concern. "But are you okay?" he asked. "Do you have enough to live on? Because if you gave it all away, I mean, my apartment is small, but I have a pull-out couch. You wouldn't have to be alone." I stared at him. Preston wanted to put me in a facility to get my money. Michael thought I was broke and offered me his couch. I put down my coffee cup. My hands were shaking. "I'm fine, Michael," I said, my voice thick with emotion I hadn't let myself feel all day. I kept enough for myself. Just then, Michael's phone rang. He looked at the screen. "It's Preston." "Answer it," I said. "Put it on speaker." There is nothing quite as satisfying as watching a plan come together, especially when that plan involves a group of ungrateful heirs, freezing in their designer pajamas. Victoria didn't just sell the house. She sold the comfort, the security, and the very ground beneath their feet. And the best part? She had a front row seat to the chaos. I woke up at 6 a.m. I made myself a cappuccino and sat in my study with my iPad. I didn't need to watch the morning news. I had my own reality show, streaming live from the lake house. I rewound the footage to 3 a.m. It was glorious. At 2:59 a.m., the house was dark and peaceful. Preston was passed out on the rug. Allison was asleep on the sofa, mouth open. At 3 a.m., the house exploded into light. The floodlights I had installed in the living room, meant to startle burglars, Clicked on at 100% brightness. It was like the surface of the sun in there. On the screen, Preston jerked awake, flailing his arms. He knocked over a half-empty bottle of wine, which spilled all over my Persian rug. "What the hell?" he screamed, shielding his eyes. Allison bolted upright. "Fire. Is it a fire?" Then the kitchen lights started strobing. Flash. Dark. Flash. Dark. "It's the alarm," Preston yelled. "Someone tripped the sensors." He scrambled to the wall panel. I watched him furiously tapping the screen. He was trying to enter the code to shut it off. Invalid code. Invalid code. System lockout 60 minutes. "It's not working," he shouted. "Mom must have changed it." Then the cold hit them. The temperature had been dropping for hours. The house, usually a cozy refuge, was now sitting at a crisp 50 degrees. I watched them scramble. Allison wrapped herself in the drapes. Preston tried to light the gas fireplace, but I had remotely disabled the pilot light safety valve via the app. It wouldn't spark. They spent the rest of the night huddled together under a pile of coats, miserable, hungover, and bathed in the harsh, unforgiving glare of security lights they couldn't turn off. I sipped my cappuccino. "Merry Christmas," I whispered. At 7:30 a.m. I got dressed. I put on my favorite winter coat, a vintage Burberry, and my driving gloves. I got into my Range Rover and began the drive north. I timed it perfectly. I wanted to arrive right at the climax of the second act. At 8 a.m., back at the lake house, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring. It was a heavy, authoritative pounding. On the camera feed, I saw Preston jump. He looked terrible. His hair was a mess. His eyes were bloodshot. And he was shivering. "Who is that?" Allison hissed. "Is it Mom?" "Maybe she saw the alarm alert," Preston said, looking hopeful. "Maybe she's here to fix it." He ran to the door. He threw it open, ready to yell at me for the malfunction, but it wasn't me. Standing on the porch were three large men in black tactical uniforms. They wore jackets embroidered with Titan security solutions. Behind them stood a man in a hard hat holding a clipboard. "Can I help you?" Preston asked, his voice cracking. "You need to vacate the premises," the lead security officer said. His voice was flat. "Board. This property is scheduled for securement." "Excuse me," Preston laughed. A nervous, arrogant sound. "This is my house." "Well, my mother's house. We are staying here." The man in the hard hat stepped forward. "We have a work order to secure the site for demolition prep. Ownership transferred at midnight. The new owner wants the building cleared of all squatters immediately." "Squatters!" Allison shrieked, pushing past Preston. She was wrapped in a duvet. "We are the Sterling family." "Who are you?" "I'm the site foreman," the man said. "And unless you are on the deed, you are trespassing. You have 10 minutes to grab your personal items and leave. After that, we change the locks and board the windows." "This is insane," Preston yelled. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," the foreman said. "They'll tell you the same thing. We have the title transfer right here." I watched this all from my phone as I pulled onto the access road. The look on Preston's face was worth every penny of the discount I gave the developer. He looked like a man who had tried to step on a bug and realized too late it was a landmine. "Call Mom," Allison cried. "Preston, call Mom. She must have done something." Preston pulled out his phone. I saw my car dashboard light up. "Incoming call, Preston." I declined it. I rounded the final bend of the driveway. I saw the chaos in person now. The black security trucks blocking their cars. The security guards standing on the porch with their arms crossed. My children looking small and pathetic in the cold morning air. I pulled up right next to the foreman's truck. I rolled down my window. Preston saw me. His face lit up with relief, then quickly shifted to anger. "Mom," he shouted, running toward my car. "Thank God. These maniacs are trying to kick us out. They say you sold the house. Tell them they're crazy." I took off my sunglasses. I looked at him. I looked at the house. "They aren't crazy, Preston," I said calmly. "They are punctual." Preston froze. "What?" "I sold the house," I said. "Last night, while you were drinking my Dom Perignon, you..." You what Allison stammered walking up behind him. But we're here. It's Christmas. I know, I said. And since you decided to spend Christmas stealing my wine and plotting to put me in a nursing home, I decided to liquidate the asset. You said you wanted the lake house, Allison? Well, you better take a picture. Because in 48 hours it's going to be a pile of rubble. You can't do this, Preston screamed. His face was turning purple. This is family property. It's our inheritance. It was my property, I corrected. Now it belongs to a very nice developer who paid cash. And as for your inheritance, I paused. I let the silence hang there in the frosty air. Check your bank app, Preston, I said softly. Michael tapped the screen. Hello? Michael, Preston's voice screamed through the phone. He sounded unhinged. Where are you? Are you with her? Is she there? Who? Michael asked. Mom? Yes, Mom, the psycho. She sold the lake house. She evicted us. She stole the trust fund. Michael, you have to help us. We have to commit her. She's lost her mind. Michael looked at me. I stood there calm, sipping my coffee. Preston, calm down, Michael said. She's right here. She seems fine. She is not fine, Preston yelled. She gave the money to charity. That was our money. Michael, listen to me. I need you to sign a statement. We need 3 family members to file for emergency guardianship. If you sign, we can freeze the transfer. We can get the money back. I'll cut you in. I'll give you a double share. I watched Michael. He looked at the phone with disgust. You tried to commit her, Michael asked quietly. She's senile, Preston lied. She left us in the cold. She told me what you did, Michael said. She told me you were planning to put her in a home so you could sell the house. That's a lie. Preston, Michael said, his voice hard. I'm not signing anything. And if you try to drag me into this, I will testify against you. I'll tell the judge exactly what a greedy bastard you've always been. You idiot, Preston shrieked. You're throwing away millions. I'm throwing away the trash, Michael said. He hung up. He looked at me. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry they're like that. I walked around the island. I hugged my son. He smelled like turpentine and cheap tobacco. And it was the best smell in the world. It's okay, I said. I handled it. So, Michael said, pulling back. What happens now? Now, I said, we talk business. You see, Michael, I lied. You lied? I didn't give the money to charity, I said. I transferred it to a holding trust. A trust that needs a new beneficiary. Someone who isn't going to spend it on country clubs and coups. Michael's eyes went wide. Mom, I don't want it. I know, I said. That's why you're the only one I trust with it. I walked to my desk. I picked up the iPad. But first, I said, I have one more loose end to tie up. Preston thinks he's just lost his inheritance. He doesn't know he's about to lose his job. I opened my email. I saw a reply from the chairman of the board of Sterling Logistics. Subject, re-emergency motion. Victoria, we received the audio file. This is disturbing. We are convening an emergency session tomorrow morning. Preston's access to the building has been suspended pending investigation. I smiled. Michael, I said, do you own a suit? No, he laughed. Good, I said, we're going shopping tomorrow. Because on Tuesday, you're coming with me to a board meeting. I think it's time Sterling Logistics had a creative director. There is a saying in the business world, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. But I prefer a different one. Don't bring a lie to an audit. Preston thought he could spin his way out of this. He thought the boardroom was his playground because he wore the right tie and knew the right buzzwords. He forgot that the boardroom was built by his father, but it was furnished by his mother. And Victoria? She was about to rearrange the furniture. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of gray steel sky that makes Chicago look like Gotham City. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my foyer. I was wearing my war suit, A charcoal Armani with a sharp collar. I applied a shade of lipstick called crimson. That looks suspiciously like blood. How do I look? A voice asked behind me. I turned. Michael was standing there. We had spent the previous afternoon at a tailor on Michigan Avenue. The beard was trimmed. The messy hair was styled into a sleek intentional wave. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him perfectly. He didn't look like a starving artist anymore. He looked like a sterling. You look dangerous, I said, smoothing his lapel. Your father would be terrified of you. Good, Michael grinned. I'm terrified of myself. We took the elevator down to the garage. My driver Thomas was waiting. He held the door open for us. To the office, Thomas, I said. And don't spare the horses. We pulled up to the Sterling Logistics Tower at 8:55 a.m. I could see the tension as soon as we walked into the lobby. The receptionist, a lovely girl named Sarah, who usually greeted me with a smile, looked down at her desk. Security guards were whispering. They know, I whispered to Michael. Rumors travel faster than light in this building. We took the private elevator to the top floor. The boardroom. I pushed the heavy oak doors open. The entire board of directors was seated, 7 men and women, who controlled the fate of the company. At the far end of the table sat the chairman Arthur Penhaligon, an old friend of my husband, and standing near the window, pacing like a caged tiger, was Preston. He stopped when I entered. His eyes darted to Michael and a sneer curled his lip. Well, Preston said, his voice loud and performative, look who finally arrived, and she brought the court jester. Sit down, Preston, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. Michael sat to my right, in the seat usually reserved for the CFO. I will not sit down, Preston snapped. He looked at the board. Arthur, look at this. She brings her estranged son, a man who hasn't stepped foot in this building in a decade, to a board meeting. I told you her judgment is compromised. The sale of the lake house was just the first symptom. Arthur cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. Victoria, Preston has made some concerning allegations regarding your mental state. He claims you liquidated personal assets impulsively and are endangering the stability of the family shares. I placed my leather portfolio on the table. I didn't open it yet. Preston claims a lot of things, I said calmly. He claims he is a top-tier financial advisor. He claims he loves his mother. He claims he was working late last Christmas Eve. Preston lied. I was preparing reports. Really, I asked, because according to the timestamp on the security footage from the lake house, at 8 p.m. on Christmas Eve, you were pouring my vintage champagne into a plastic cup and toasting to my demise. The room went silent. Preston turned red. That was a private family gathering. You were spying on us. I was monitoring a company asset, I corrected. The lake house was owned by Sterling Holdings, and you were trespassing. This is personal drama, Preston scoffed, waving his hand. Arthur, we are here to discuss business. My mother is trying to ruin my reputation because she's lonely and bitter. It has nothing to do with the company. It has everything to do with the company, I said. I opened my portfolio. I pulled out a thick stack of papers. They were color-coded. Item 1, I said, sliding a blue folder toward Arthur. The forensic audit of Preston Sterling's expense account. Preston froze. I reviewed the last 3 years of client entertainment, I said. Preston, perhaps you can explain why Sterling Logistics paid $25,000 for a business retreat in Cabo San Lucas last February, a retreat that, according to your wife's Instagram, was actually your anniversary trip. Arthur opened the folder. He adjusted his glasses. And here, I slid a red folder across the table. Consulting fees. You've been paying a monthly retainer of $5,000 to a firm called Apex Solutions. I looked up Apex. It's a shell company registered to your home address. That's for independent analysis, Preston stammered. It's standard practice. It's embezzlement, Preston, I said softly. You've been siphoning company money to pay for your gambling debts. Oh yes, I found those too. Preston looked around the room. The board members were no longer looking at him with sympathy. They were looking at him like he was a liability. She's lying, Preston shouted. He slammed his hand on the table. She's fabricating evidence. She's senile. She sold $1 million house for a discount just to spite me. Does that sound like a sane CEO? It sounds like a CEO who knows how to cut losses. Michael spoke up for the first time. His voice was deep, calm, and commanded the room instantly. Preston whipped around. Shut up, Michael. Go back to your finger painting. Actually, I said, Michael is here as my proxy, and as the new beneficiary of the Sterling Trust. Preston's eyes bulged. What? You gave it to him. He'll blow it on weed and canvas. Better than blowing it on fake consulting firms and plotting against his own mother, I replied. Preston was cornered. He knew the financial evidence was damning, so he pulled out his last weapon, the nuclear option. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. It doesn't matter, Preston said, his voice shaking with rage, because you don't have the authority to fire me. He slid the paper down the table. This, Preston announced, is a signed affidavit from Dr. Halloway. He has treated Victoria for years. It states that she has shown signs of early-onset cognitive decline, memory loss, paranoia, erratic decision-making. I looked at the paper. Dr. Halloway was my podiatrist. He treated my bunions, not my brain. Preston, I said, this is a letter from a foot doctor. He's a medical professional, Preston screamed, and combined with your erratic behavior this week, it's enough to trigger the competency clause in the company bylaws. I am motioning for an immediate suspension of Victoria Sterling's voting rights, pending a psychiatric evaluation. He looked at the board. All in favor, Preston yelled. The room was deadly silent. I looked at Arthur. Arthur looked at the medical report. Then I reached into my pocket. I think I said, pulling out my phone, before we vote on my competency, we should listen to one last thing. The smoking gun regarding my mental state. I connected my phone to the boardroom speaker system. You want to talk about plots, Preston? Let's hear yours. I pressed play. The audio boomed through the high-fidelity speakers, built into the mahogany walls. The dementia diagnosis is tricky, but if we document her confusion, like how she forgot we weren't coming tonight, we can build a case for incompetence. Preston's face went white. He looked like he was having a cardiac event. The recording continued. By February, she'll be in assisted living, and we can sell the main house. We just have to stick to the plan. Make her look confused. Gaslight the hell out of her. The word gaslight hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I stopped the recording. For 10 seconds, the only sound in the room was the hum of the HVAC system and Preston's shallow, panicked breathing. Arthur Penhaligon took off his glasses. He looked at Preston with a mixture of disbelief and profound disgust. Preston, Arthur said, his voice quiet but razor-sharp, did you just admit on tape to conspiring to frame the majority shareholder, your own mother, for mental incompetence? Preston stood up, knocking his chair back. That's a deepfake. It's AI. She manipulated it. Do you know what technology can do these days? She hired someone to fake my voice. It's not a deepfake, Preston, I said. It's a video file, 4K resolution. I can cast it to the screen. If you'd like everyone to see the Santa hat you were wearing while you plotted my demise. I looked at the board. But the personal betrayal isn't why we are here, I said, pivoting back to business. We are here because a board member, who is willing to defraud his own family, is certainly willing to defraud this company. And as the audit of his expense account shows, he already has. I pointed to the blue folders, the shell company, the gambling debts, the fake consulting fees. That is wire fraud, gentlemen. It is a federal crime, and it exposes Sterling Logistics to massive liability. Arthur slammed the blue folder shut. He didn't need to see any more. I am motioning for the immediate termination of Preston Sterling from the board of directors and his role as vice president of accounts, Arthur announced, for cause effective immediately. Seconded, said the woman to his left, the head of legal. All in favor, Arthur asked. Every hand in the room went up. Even the guy Preston played golf with on Sundays raised his hand, avoiding Preston's gaze. You can't do this, Preston screamed. He looked wild-cornered. I am a Sterling. My father built this company. You can't fire me. Your father built it, I said, standing up, and I financed it, and you? You were just looting it. I pressed the intercom button on the table. Security to the boardroom, please. The doors opened almost instantly. 2 guards stepped in. They weren't the usual lobby guards. They were the same men from the Lake House eviction. I liked their efficiency. Please escort Mr. Sterling from the building, I said. He is to take nothing. No laptop, no phone, no files. If he wants his personal effects, you can box them up and mail them to, well, wherever he is sleeping tonight. Preston looked at me. His eyes were filled with hate, but under the hate there was fear. He realized that the safety net was gone. The trust fund was gone. The job was gone. You're going to regret this, he hissed, as the guards grabbed his arms. You're going to die alone, mother. Maybe, I said coolly, but I'll die solvent. The guards dragged him out. He was shouting about lawyers and wrongful termination until the elevator doors dinged shut. The silence returned to the boardroom. The tension slowly evaporated, replaced by the awkward reality of what had just happened. Arthur cleared his throat. He looked at the empty chair where Preston had sat. Then he looked at me and then at Michael. Victoria, Arthur said. This leaves a significant vacancy. Preston managed the client relationships. We are in the middle of a merger. This chaos. It could hurt the stock price. I am aware, I said, which is why I am not retiring just yet. I will step in as interim VP to smooth the transition. I placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, and I continued, I would like to propose a new consultant for our rebranding initiative. Someone who understands the Sterling legacy, but isn't weighed down by its greed. Michael has a background in design and a moral compass that, as we've seen, is rare in this family. Michael stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He didn't look nervous. He looked like a man who had watched a storm pass and was ready to rebuild. I'm not a finance guy, Michael told the board honestly. I don't know about shell companies or tax shelters, but I know that Sterling Logistics used to stand for reliability, not maneuvering. I'd like to help us get back to that. Arthur studied him. He saw the resemblance to my late husband, the jawline, the quiet confidence. Well, Arthur smiled, extending a hand. It's nice to finally meet the other Sterling. Welcome aboard, Michael. We walked out of the meeting an hour later. The sun was trying to break through the clouds. You were brutal in there, Michael said. As we got into the elevator, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost, I asked. Almost, Michael grinned. Then I remembered the gaslight comment. Yeah, he deserved it. He did, I agreed. But the war isn't quite over, Michael. We won the battle for the company. Now we have to secure the peace. What do you mean? I checked my phone. I had an email from my lawyer. The new will was drafted and ready for signature. Preston is desperate, I said, and desperate men do desperate things. We need to make sure that when I'm gone, he can never hurt you or the legacy ever again. We have one last document to sign. We have reached the end of the road. We watched Victoria suffer the betrayal, execute the eviction, and clean out the boardroom. Now comes the final piece of paperwork, the last will and testament. It is the document that speaks for us when we can no longer speak for ourselves. And in Victoria's case, she wanted to make sure her voice would ring loud and clear, long after she was gone. She wasn't just leaving money. She was leaving a lesson. 3 days after the boardroom showdown, I sat in the office of my estate attorney, Mr. Henderson. The mahogany desk was covered in documents. The air smelled of old paper and expensive ink. Michael sat next to me. He looked uncomfortable. He was an artist who was used to looking at blank canvases, not legal contracts that determine the fate of millions of dollars. "Are you sure about this, Victoria?" Mr. Henderson asked. He held his pen hovering over the final draft. "This is drastic. In 40 years of practice, I have rarely seen a disinheritance this complete. It will almost certainly be contested." "Let them contest it," I said, adjusting my glasses. "That is why I hired you. I want this will to be ironclad. I want it to be a fortress that Preston and Allison cannot breach, no matter how many lawyers they hire." "Very well," Mr. Henderson said. He began to read the clauses aloud. "To my eldest son, Preston Sterling," he read, "I leave the sum of $1. This amount is not an oversight, but a reflection of the value he placed on his relationship with his mother. Furthermore, any attempt by him to contest this will shall result in the immediate release of the forensic audit regarding his embezzlement from Sterling Logistics to the district attorney." Michael let out a low whistle. "You're blackmailing him from the grave?" "I'm incentivizing him to behave," I corrected. "Preston responds to leverage. This is the ultimate leverage." "To my daughter, Allison Sterling," Mr. Henderson continued, "I leave my collection of vintage cookbooks. Perhaps if she learns to cook her own Christmas dinner, she will appreciate the effort that goes into it. She receives no financial assets, no property, and no trust funds." I nodded. It was harsh, yes, but Allison needed to learn that money was earned, not inherited. She had a master's degree she had never used. It was time she dusted it off. And finally, Mr. Henderson looked at Michael. "To my son, Michael Sterling, I leave the entirety of the Sterling estate, including the primary residence, the investment portfolio, and the majority shares of Sterling Logistics." Michael shifted in his seat. "Mom, I told you I don't need all that. It's too much." "Wait," I said. "Read the condition, Mr. Henderson." However, the lawyer read, "This inheritance is placed in a spendthrift trust. Michael cannot access the principal for personal luxury expenses. The funds are to be used exclusively for the establishment and operation of the Sterling Arts Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting young artists. Michael shall draw a reasonable salary as director, but he cannot liquidate the assets to buy yachts, sports cars, or bail out his siblings." Michael looked at me, his eyes softened. He understood. I wasn't just giving him money. I was giving him a purpose. And I was protecting him. If Preston or Allison came crying to him for money, he could honestly say, "I can't help you. The trust won't allow it." I was being the bad guy one last time, so he didn't have to be. "I love it," Michael said. "A foundation. We can help so many people." "Exactly," I said. "We are going to take the money that fueled their greed and turn it into something beautiful." I picked up the pen. "Victoria A. Sterling." I signed with a flourish. "It is done," Mr. Henderson said, stamping the document. As we walked out of the office, my phone rang. It was Allison. I hadn't spoken to her since the driveway at the lake house. I answered. "Hello, Allison, Mom?" Her voice was small, broken. "Mom, I'm at your house. The locks. My key doesn't work. I just wanted to come talk. I wanted to apologize. Please." I stopped on the sidewalk. The winter wind whipped around my coat. "The locks were changed on Christmas Day, Allison," I said. "But where am I supposed to go?" she cried. "Preston is a wreck. He's drinking. He's talking about fleeing the country. I can't deal with him. I need my mother. You don't need a mother, I said gently but firmly. You need a reality check. You are 38 years old, Allison. Go home, hug your children, get a job, and maybe in a year or two, when you have built a life that you actually pay for, we can have coffee. Mom, please, goodbye, Allison. I hung up. I blocked the number. I looked at Michael. He offered me his arm. Are you okay? He asked. I am better than okay, I said. I am free. 6 months later. The air in Tuscany smells different than the air in Chicago. It smells of sun-baked earth, lavender and peace. I sat on the terrace of the small villa I had rented for the year. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't have a grand dining room or a security system that needed to be monitored 24/7. It was simple. It was quiet. My iPad chimed on the bistro table next to my glass of Chianti. It was a video call from Michael. I pressed accept. Michael's face filled the screen. He was beaming. Behind him, I could see a large open space filled with easels, messy paint cans, and teenagers laughing. We did it, Mom, Michael said, panning the camera around. The Sterling Arts Center opened its doors this morning. We have 30 students enrolled for the summer program. Kids who couldn't afford brushes, let alone tuition. They're loving it. It looks magnificent, Michael, I said, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the Tuscan sun. The press release looked very professional. Well, Michael laughed. I had a good mentor. The board is happy too. The company stock is up 12% since we announced the charity initiative. Turns out, people like buying logistics services from a company that gives back. Imagine that, I smiled. I saw them, by the way, Michael said, his voice dropping slightly. He didn't have to say who, and I asked. I took a sip of wine. Preston is working at a tax preparation franchise in the suburbs, Michael said. A strip mall place. He sits in a cubicle. He looks tired, but he's working. He asked about you, did he? He didn't ask for money, Michael said. He just asked if you were happy. I told him you were. And Allison? She's working at a bakery, Michael said. She burned her arm on the oven rack last week. She complained about it for an hour, but she showed up for her shift the next day. She's actually learning how to bake, Mom. For real. I looked out over the rolling hills of the vineyard below. Preston was doing taxes. Allison was baking bread. They weren't living the high life. They weren't drinking vintage champagne in a lake house they didn't pay for. They were tired. They were working. And they were struggling. But they were building character. For the first time in their lives, they were becoming actual people. That's good to hear, Michael, I said. Keep an eye on them, but don't help them. I won't, Michael promised. I love you, Mom. Enjoy the sunset. I love you too, Michael. The screen went black. I sat there as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. I thought about that Christmas dinner. The empty chairs, the cold silence, the betrayal that felt like a knife in my back. It would have been easy to just cry. It would have been easy to let them put me in a home and take everything I built. But a mother's job isn't just to feed her children. Sometimes, a mother's job is to starve the parts of them that are rotten. I had to cut off the money to save the people underneath. I raised my glass to the empty terrace. Dinner is served, I whispered. And this time, I didn't mind eating alone. Story end. Mary. And that, ladies, is how you close the books. Victoria taught us something powerful today. We spend our lives trying to leave our children a legacy. Money, houses, jewelry. But sometimes, the most valuable inheritance we can give them is the ability to stand on their own 2 feet, even if we have to kick the chair out from under them to make it happen. Preston and Allison thought they were losing everything. In reality, They were gaining the only thing that matters, their own lives. So, here is my question for you tonight. If you found out your family was plotting against you, would you have the courage to pull the plug? Or would you try to keep the peace? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed watching Victoria turn a tragedy into a triumph and a nice Italian vacation, please hit that like button and subscribe. This is Mary signing off. Stay sharp, stay solvent, and remember, never let anyone treat you like an expiring asset.